The great burpening has begun.
I'm gonna have a Girl Scout cookie before we start. Welcome to the Siren Songbook, a podcast where we discuss female artists, their music, their history, and the impact they've made on the music industry. Join us each month as we pick a new inspirational artist and celebrate exactly what it is that makes them so magical. Hello everyone, welcome to episode number 2 of the Siren Songbook. I am Amy.
And I'm Casey.
And today we are talking Carole King. Casey picked her last time at the end of our episode.
I did.
Is there any specific reason you picked Carole King for our second episode?
You know, I think that so my parents had this giant folder of CDs that, like, when I was leaving high school and I had finally gotten a car, I was like, you know what, I'm just going to pick some random CDs and just start listening to them so I have something to listen to in the car because I hated the radio. And I saw this album called Tapestry in there and I really liked the album cover and I was like, oh, I wonder what this is. And I was so mesmerized by it that, like, I just had to listen to that album in its entirety every single day. And it wasn't something that I grew up listening to in any capacity. And I'm not really sure what it is. It's like there's some magic behind the atmosphere of the album that made me want to dive as deep as I possibly could into Carole King's universe. There was one time that I was driving home or driving back to my dorm room from college when I was visiting, and I was so invested in the music and I was just like singing at the top of my lungs that I missed not one but like 3 exits I could have gotten off and almost drove all the way to the border. I was just vibing that much. Yeah, and I think I've been chasing in my own music, trying to find a way to build just such a cohesive sonic atmosphere that, like, Tapestry was able to have, that made, like, in my own music. So I think that's kind of why I wanted to explore her material and her life a little bit more this week.
And also, she's just one of the most prolific songwriters of our time, of all time.
Mm-hmm.
She has 118, is that what we said? 118 hits. Like, can you even imagine?
It's, I mean, unbelievable. I mean, people will spend their entire life hoping to have one hit, let alone 118. Oh my God.
Like, it's insane. And the fact that, like, they're not all songs that she wrote for herself. There's songs that she wrote for other people. There's songs that I didn't even know she wrote. Like Locomotion, when I found out. When I was a kid, I loved that song.
Yeah. It's so crazy how big of a stamp on music that she has in everyone's life. And when people talk about, like, the heavy hitters of songwriting, people always talk about, you know, McCartney and Lennon, Phil Collins, or Paul Simon.
A lot of men.
Yeah, a lot of men. Paul Simon and Art Garfunkel. Paul Simon and Art Garfunkel. These people wrote prolific music on their own, but then to think, like, some of the soundtracks of our entire lives were penned by her and her ex-husband. It's just crazy how much they can understand the human condition enough, bottle it, and turn it into a hit, and, like, just sustain in the way that very few songwriters will ever experience.
It's just insane to think that they wrote for all these famous people, and then she herself wrote for herself too, and had success in it. And I was telling Leo last night, I was like, she went on to do Broadway, and then she was like, I'm gonna write soundtracks for movies now. And
she's one of those people that, like, when people talk about writing like they're running out of time, that is the definition of Carole King.
Yes. Well, and also to get into a little bit of her history, she was born in 1942, February 9th, 1942, and she developed a love for music very, very young. They said when she was 3, she fell in love with music.
Oh yeah, a prodigy.
Yeah. And that's exactly where I was going with this, is that by 4 they said she had perfect pitch, and her dad would use it as a party trick. Like, 4 years old having perfect pitch, and then she did kindergarten and skipped first grade and went straight to second grade. and then was in college by 16. So like already I wanted to look up if anybody knows what her IQ is. Like, is she literal genius?
Oh my gosh. I mean, has to be.
Yeah.
Literally has to be. I think it takes someone so incredibly smart and in tune to be able to write a hit song. It's not something that's easy to do by any means. It's like a deep understanding of music and the whole. And I think that she, in a way, kind of created, when people talk about, writing the formula, like she created the formula.
Yeah. I already knew that she was genius by like just the fact that she wrote 118 hit songs.
Yeah.
That's insane in itself.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that on top of that, she has to have a really high IQ score.
Definitely.
But yeah, so she was really young and she got into music, and her mom started teaching her at the piano. They'd set her on a chair on a phone book on something else, like to make her tall enough to reach the piano.
So cute.
And she went through school. She had a band called the
Cosigns.
The Cosigns.
Yeah.
In the 50s, which I didn't get to listen to any of their stuff.
Well, I think they mainly like recorded demo work for Paul Simon, who was also a childhood friend, which, oh my God, one of the other prolific songwriters of all time.
The circles you run in is like insane.
It's insane how small the music scene actually was at that time, and actually still can be today. But her and her group of the Cosigns would help demo Paul Simon's tracks, and they make like $25 a song, which even today, like that's like two gallons of gas. But I mean, that was a lot for a 15-year-old girl.
Well, I mean, $25, we can't even get paid for songs anymore.
I know. Must be nice. I would like $25 for a song, please.
I'll demo your song for $25. Well, and then she made her first official recording, which was a promotional single called The Right Girl.
Yeah.
And that was released by ABC Paramount in 1958.
Mm-hmm.
And then she attended college, which is where she met Jerry. And
yes.
She was 16, I think, when she started college, 17 when she became pregnant, and they got married. She was married at 17 years old.
I know that she was ahead in a lot of life's markers, but what we were talking about early at the breakfast table, if we married the people that we were dating at 17, wow. What a life.
I know that it's still a thing that people at that age can marry, but I feel like it was more common back then, maybe.
Oh, yeah, most definitely. I mean, at that time period, it was like, in August 1959? In 1958, I believe, is the year that they finally allowed women to open a bank account without the permission of their husband, or have access to the bank account without their husband's permission, let alone we'd have to wait, another like 20 years for women to have access to apply for a credit card without their husband's permission. So I get it. Life, kind of to have any sort of currency or agency as a woman, kind of have to be married.
But yeah, like 16, 17 years old, she's married to this guy. She's pregnant. She's having a baby. And just that in itself blows my mind, because then she still continued on despite all of this, being 16. She left college and they would work during the day. She worked as a secretary. And then in the evening, they would write together, her and Jerry.
Yeah. It honestly, like, kind of how we talked about the beginnings of Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham, and the beginning of their career was Stevie working long hours as a waitress and as a cleaning lady, and then coming home and then in the evenings working on their material. I think that that's such a cool like parallel between two really prolific songwriters.
And she has a baby now.
Yeah.
She has a husband. She's coming home to this and still writing. The fact that she got where she is in that situation is just amazing to me. Like, that is a powerful woman.
Resilient.
It in the musical, I don't know how accurate the musical is per se. I tried to look up. I know that she was part of it. She watched it. She was like, I can't watch my life play out in front of me. And so she left halfway through and told them, you're doing a great job. I just can't watch it.
Yeah.
Which makes me think that it must have been somewhat accurate.
Yeah, I'm sure there's some weird
timing and stuff.
Well, yeah, some weird like uncanny valley-esque type like hellscape of watching your life play out on stage.
Yeah.
I mean, like, oh, this is so weird that everyone finds this entertaining. This is stuff I actually lived.
In the musical, Jerry is going off and
fucking around.
Yeah.
Ugh. Yes. Dealing with infidelity very shortly into their relationship, I think, is really hard. And just the fact that she, I mean, in many ways, took all of these different hardships of life, being a mother at 17 years old, getting married, having a job as a secretary, all these types of things, and going, you know what, I'm going to push through because I know that this is my calling, this is my dream. I think is really cool, really admirable of her.
And they quit college, and she was writing in the evenings and working as a secretary. And they're writing. Now, see, this is where I get confused with the timing of the musical and what I read.
Yeah.
Because in the musical, they're like, oh, she wrote a hit song and then she met Jerry, and I don't know where all that timing falls in, but she did write with Jerry, Will You Love Me Tomorrow, for the Shirelles. And that hit number one, which, by the way, was the first number one song for a Black girls group ever. Which is also really cool.
Yeah.
And a little bit of fun fact for Black History Month, that was the first song that a Black girls group hit number one. But after that, they quit their day jobs and they started writing full time.
Yeah.
And they were working with
the Brill Building?
Yeah. Oh, okay. She was writing, she had an office in there, right?
Yes. The Brill Building is such an interesting time in music because it's almost like a hit factory.
Yeah.
That was going on in the 1960s or 1950s and 60s. It was right in New York City. She walked right in and was like, "Hey, I'm a songwriter. Hire me, please." They kind of like, okay, maybe we'll see what you can do. The cool magical part about her and her husband's relationship is that her being such a prolific arranger and composer on her own, he had this way with words, somewhat like Elton John and Tim Rice.
Yes.
Where Elton would write these beautiful piano parts and Tim would come up with like the most beautiful lyrics to explain or what was going on in the situation, that sort of thing. And in that time period, they ended up writing, some of the biggest hits of that entire decade. It Might As Well Rain in September, which she recorded herself in 1962. And then other things like, you mentioned Will You Still Love Me Tomorrow, which was then later recorded not just by the Shirelles, but by Aretha Franklin. And then also was a song that she ended up recording again on her own solo debut album. I think that's really cool.
Yeah. They had their best friends in that building, Barry Mann and Cynthia Whale.
Yeah.
And they had this like competitiveness, but also this supportiveness. But it was just insane to watch them write hit song after hit song for these people. Yeah. And they wrote so many songs. Chains, which was later recorded by the Beatles. They wrote The Locomotion and Keep Your Hands Off My Baby for Little Eva, who was also their babysitter. And then also who Jerry was like, I like her. That's a story for another time. Yeah. But they wrote hits for her. It Might As Well Rain Until September. They wrote a lot of hits under this one roof.
One of my favorite songs that she wrote or that they wrote as a group was You Make Me Feel Like a Natural Woman by Aretha Franklin. I think such a beautiful, beautiful song in the musical. And I preface this part of Will You Still Love Me Tomorrow because that I want to say that of the songs that they wrote as a pair, that is my absolute favorite song. I think the first time I heard it like just gutted me as a person because the lyrics on that are just so tender and so honest, and to know that they were written by, is it Gary or Jerry? I don't know.
I think it's Jerry.
Oh, okay. And written by Jerry. The lyrics were so tender and so beautiful and so heartfelt, and I think really spoke to sometimes, the art imitating life sort of thing, like kind of what was going on between the two of them. And just like also, You Make Me Feel Like a Natural Woman, something so beautiful about making you feel like you can be metaphorically or physically naked with another person and feel beautiful and feel loved and feel seen. I think that that's just a testament to their relationship as a couple.
It's also insane to me that he wrote those lyrics.
Yeah, dude.
Like, that is a song that we as women are just, we sing it out. It's an anthem for us, and he wrote those lyrics.
Yeah. A lot of these songs that they wrote kind of were part of this like genre of pop music that ended up being called the Brill Building sound. So all the different songwriting duos or solo songwriters that came out of that were working in their little rooms with their one piano, all of these songs kind of started to sound the same in some way, but that sort of recipe for a hit was established there with the Brill Building and like kind of founded by Carole and her husband. And I think that that's really cool that like the sound of the late 50s and 60s as a whole in music is attributed to her.
Yeah.
You know, that's super cool and super powerful. Not many people can say that.
And then as time goes on, they start to realize, oh, these artists are starting to write their own music. And that kind of died a little bit. You still see it nowadays in like Nashville, especially with country music.
Yeah.
I feel like it's very popular in country music where people are writing music for other artists. And so you still see that method a little bit here and there, but I feel like it's kind of faded out. That was like a generation of
there was something very, especially in the 1960s, the late 50s, 1960s, there's something so algorithmic about songwriting and about hit singles. And then we start to see at the turn of the late 60s like the beginnings of the folk movement, the folk revival with Bob Dylan, with Joan Baez, with those different heavy hitters in that time period where they are writing songs about their life, their songs about the struggles of being a human being. And this is all based off of their obsession with like the artists of the 30s, the starts of country music of the 1930s, like Woody Guthrie and the Carter family and that sort of thing. So that movement away from just songwriting as an art form and more so in an autobiographical sense kind of brought an end to the era of the Brill Building sound and kind of forced Carole and some of those other songwriters to kind of look more introspectively and go, okay, well, if I want to still be a songwriter, I have to be an artist. And step in front of the scene.
So she wrote she sang and recorded It Might As Well Rain Until September, and that was her first success. And it charted 22 in the US and number 3 in the UK. And she recorded some follow-up singles, but then took a hiatus in 1966. And then when that turn happened, she moves to Laurel Canyon.
Divorces her husband,
Divorces her husband.
Moves to California.
And decides, I'm going to start recording my own music again. And that's like the turn for her because the Brill Building is kind of on its way out. People are writing their own music now. They're doing their own thing. And she's like, the music I'm writing, I don't see anybody else singing.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's kind of what was happening at the turn of that decade, was a lot of people were writing music that was very personal to them and not so much just I'm making hits.
But I think it's really interesting about the community of songwriters in the Brill Building. They all influenced each other's work. And when she makes that move over to Laurel Canyon, almost right away, she starts hanging out with these songwriters that have started to change the way success is brought upon artists in the late 60s. And she becomes friends with James Taylor, with Joni Mitchell, who at this point already has a couple of hit songs. You know, the people in the band America or the Eagles and that sort of thing. And those people and hanging out with that sort of creative group really brought out that individualism in her own songwriting. And it was only by hanging out with and becoming such good friends with James Taylor that he was like, hey, I think you should record an album or something. I don't know. Maybe that was crazy. I kind of like your music. I think people want to hear it, you know?
And I am so glad, like, again, it's that community thing. Because back when she was writing songs, she had that community already from high school. I forgot to mention that she was dating Neil Sedaka. Is that how you pronounce it? Sedaka? She was dating Neil in high school.
Yeah.
And he wrote a song called Oh, Carole.
Mm-hmm.
And then they wrote one back called O'Neill in response. But like just that she had a community there. And then she moves to California and she builds this new community in California with Joni Mitchell and James Taylor, and really it's the circles you run in.
Like 100%. Like there's such a polarity to Carole and to her talent that she attracted it wherever she went. And I think that that's really cool that, you know, by 1970 she went from being around people that were pumping out music in a commercialized fashion to hanging out with people that were writing from the heart. I mean, and like you could argue that, I don't like to sit there and go, oh, well, hit songs are not
from the heart.
Right. But there's just like a
emotion behind it. But there's a difference between like the people who write just because they're writing from the heart and people who write because they're trying to make a hit.
It's like the difference between like, and I'm not knocking Kraft mac and cheese. I love Kraft mac and cheese. But it's like going from making Kraft mac and cheese to making like homemade shelled 5 different cheesed mac and cheeses.
Leo mac and cheese.
Yes.
Leo makes mac and cheese every Thanksgiving.
Dude.
I look forward to it every year.
I judge a mac and cheese, but you know, someone really has it down when they put the breadcrumbs on top, and when you like scrape it, it has like a sound to it, and then when you pull it up, there's like a whole thing of cheese that comes up with it. Like there's a difference. And don't get me wrong, I still love Kraft mac and cheese. I still crave it, but homemade mac and cheese, and that's, you know, not
that's
to like
the difference between making a hit and writing from the heart.
You can tell I'm hungry. But, you know, with the help of James Taylor and Joni Mitchell, she ends up recording her first album in 1970 called Writer. And it didn't really find much success. I think it peaked at number 84 on the Billboard Top 200. And in that same year, she started working as kind of a musician for hire. She played keys on B.B. King's album. But she still was writing, and she still had a story to tell. And I think with her very first album, there was like this sense of, I'm not really sure what I'm trying to say just yet, because, you know, it still had been so soon since she had broken up with her, not only her creative writing partner, but her husband, her very first love, the father of her children.
From the time that she was 17.
So
yes. Like, yeah, this is
like, you don't really know who you are as a person yet at 17 years old. I could say, I feel like I've just started to figure it out. I'm 28, but at 17 years old, this person comes into your life and they're essentially like a god. And as you get older, to break apart from each other, that's like breaking apart from the only person you know. To call back again to our last episode with Landslide, like, I've been afraid of changing because I built my life around you. Carole King built her life around
Jerry.
Yeah. And
he fucked it up.
And he's a cheater.
Well, and that's what's so bizarre to me too. I'm gonna go back to this for a minute, because he literally went up to her and was like, I like little Eva, little Eva.
Yeah, I think.
I like her and I'm going to cheat on you with her. And she was just like, okay,
loser behavior.
And then he was like, okay, I'm not gonna do that anymore. And then that wasn't true. And so, you know, she left him. But
she picked up her 2 kids and she started a new life and found some people that saw her for her and her talent and went, okay, well, we want to support you and we want to make this work. And by 1971, she had enough songs to where she would start recording just one of the most famous albums of all time, Tapestry. And just to give you, we talk about the Brill Building and how at the very same time that Carole and her husband are writing some of the biggest hits of the decade, right next door, another group of people are writing a separate slew of big hits. Here in Laurel Canyon at this same time, when she's recording Tapestry, which would go on to be one of the best and most prolific albums of all time, right next door in the same recording studio, Joni Mitchell is recording Blue, which is another fundamental, one of the best albums of all time. And on the opposite end, the Carpenters are recording their, self-titled album, which has Rainy Days and Mondays on it. Some other extremely big hits. It's crazy how some of the best music ever written is being written in Laurel Canyon in 1971.
Well, and then not just that, but she has like James Taylor and Joni on Tapestry, helping her write, helping her play, helping her sing backups, helping her. like these iconic artists are all working on Tapestry together too.
At the same time that they're recording Tapestry, James Taylor's recording his prolific album Mudslide Slim, and at the same time they're both recording their renditions of Carole King's song You've Got a Friend, which hit #1 for James Taylor. It became like a #1 hit single, and Carole King later said in 1972 interview that she didn't write it with James or anybody really specifically in mind, but when James heard it, he really liked it and wanted to record it. So it wasn't even just that these people saw the potential in her and wanted to just help her succeed. They were friends of hers and fans of hers.
Yes.
And to see just this prolific group of individuals building each other up in such a way, I think is such a beautiful thing that I currently am not seeing a lot in this current state of the music industry, which is a bummer. I think that bringing each other together is really cool. I think, we see some of that with like Brandi Carlile's like a really instrumental musician and bringing people together. I feel like she's one of the last. She has that Laurel Canyon energy.
Who again is friends with
Joni
Mitchell. Well, she has Live from the Canyon Hills.
Yeah.
Is her, so it is all based around that Laurel Canyon. She has that, which we will do a podcast on.
Well, yes, we will definitely be talking about Brandi. Oh, Brandi.
But yeah, so, and then It's Too Late hit #1, and that was there for 15 consecutive weeks and remained in the charts for nearly 6 years.
Yeah, Tapestry itself as an album sold 30 million copies worldwide, and the album garnered not 1, but 4 Grammy Awards, including Album of the Year, Best Pop Vocal Performance for Female, Record of the Year for It's Too Late, and Song of the Year, with King becoming the first woman to win the award for You Got a Friend. And then the album has appeared on Rolling Stone's 500 Greatest Albums of All Time list at number 36. And if I'm being completely honest, should be a lot higher than that.
Yes.
But I never agree with Rolling Stone's list rankings.
Yeah.
I could do a whole podcast on how they are smoking something up there. God damn.
But yeah, she's the first woman to win the award, Song of the Year.
Yeah.
She wins Album of the Year, Best Pop Vocal, and then she turns around that same year and releases music.
Yeah.
And that entered the top 10 and was at number 8 for a few weeks, and then for a few weeks both of those albums were in the top 10.
Yeah. Which is like, who's doing that right now? Taylor Swift, who's also like the biggest artist in the world currently. I mean, and the through line between the two of them is also so insane. Yeah, having 2 albums released in the same year, occupying the top 10 of the Billboard charts, that's just never been done.
Yes.
It's breaking boundaries. She didn't need a writing partner. That honestly, to see that she had a legendary career as a songwriter before she turned 30, and then to start a legendary career as a solo artist, as a mother of 2, is, I mean, unbelievable. And what I think is really interesting is how much those accolades and those awards don't affect her as a person. The following year, 1972, when she's winning 4 Grammys for Tapestry, she wasn't even there. She was on her farm in Idaho. It's like, oh, you guys are giving me 4 Grammy Awards tonight? That's nice. Anyway.
I love that about her, is just that she's just so simple and down to earth. And so,
yeah,
which I think was a big thing for her when she was starting this out. She's like, I'm a normal person. I'm a normal person who wants to listen to a normal person sing and record music.
Yeah. I mean,
and everybody did.
Exactly. I mean, it's so great that she had a group of other artists that saw the potential in her to say, hey, you don't need to be the one behind the scenes. You can be up front and be successful. And both James and Joni really brought that out of her. But at the same time, yeah, she would be writing whether or not she had a career.
Yeah.
And I think about that, like I've heard, Taylor Swift talk about that, where if she wasn't Taylor Swift, that she'd still write all the time because it's a passion. It's something that comes unbelievably naturally to the both of them, and they'd be doing it accolade or not. I mean, Carole even more so, because she can't be bothered to show up to the award
She doesn't
show.
care about the awards.
No, I mean, like the definition of unbothered. And So she releases 2 albums in 1971, 2 unbelievably big albums, 1972 hits. And she releases Rhythm and Reasons and Fantasy in 1973. Rhythm and Reasons produced another hit single, Been to Canaan, which hit number 24 on the charts. And Fantasy produced 2 hits, Believe in Humanity, hitting number 28 on the Billboard charts, and Corazon, which hit number 37. It's unbelievable that she had so much success within 3 years of being a solo artist. She performed a free concert in New York City in 1973 with Central Park, and 100,000 people attended. That's insane. That's like genuinely nuts. 100,000 people in 3 years of being a solo artist came to watch her specifically perform. I mean,
and then they filmed it and released it.
Yeah. And we see that kind of success. The Beatles only once or like the Beatles before them, her 10 years earlier was like the only other time we've seen an artist produce that much like craze and success around her. And that's not her writing the brill building sound songs anymore. That's her writing from the heart.
Yeah.
And that's just, I think that's so cool. The recipe for number 1 that she created, she could let go of and still find immeasurable amounts of success.
Yeah. Then in 1974, she released Wraparound Joy, which was her 3rd album to reach number 1. That's now 3 albums out of 5, and all of them charted.
Yeah.
In 1975, she wrote a music album for the animated show Really Rosie. And in 1976, she wrote Thoroughbred, which Goffin actually came back and helped her write some songs for that. So they kind of mended their relationship and were able to come back and write some songs for that.
It's absolutely insane what she was able to accomplish in just a small amount of time. And I mean, only people who like truly have that gift can do that. You know, I think about recently, a couple years ago, they had like a celebration of the 50th anniversary of Tapestry. And few albums get to have that sort of celebration around them as something that meant something to so many people. We think about going back to Tapestry as being, yes, her most successful album of all time. But like a lot of those songs were then re-recorded by other people. Will You Still Love Me Tomorrow? Obviously a song that she wrote prior to becoming a solo artist, but her rendition was just so tender and lovely that when people are doing covers, they're not thinking about the Shirelles version, they're thinking about the Carole King version. Or when she does a cover of her own song, You Make Me Feel Like a Natural Woman. And yes, she doesn't have that diva quality that Aretha Franklin brought to it, this like heavy hitting voice, but she had this honesty, this almost like, I think the reason why people are so interested and so involved in Carole King is that she feels like your neighbor, your best friend, your mother, your sister. And the way that she's able to capture that sort of, I'm trying to think of the word, because obviously I don't want to say average because she's definitely not average in any capacity, but like to be able to capture.
Well, that's what she said, normal. She felt too much like a normal person to...
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's so refreshing when you look at people that are really popular, like Taylor Swift is not a normal person, and she doesn't act like one. No. She doesn't have to because she's Taylor Swift. But Carole King literally is like your sister or your best friend or your mom or your aunt or whoever. And it's that person in your life... Or you. I mean, you could see yourself in her too and think, oh, she's writing these songs for me specifically. There's not this, I don't know, this aura of superstardom between you and her. And I think that's why so many people resonate with it so much. Still 53 years later.
Which is insane because she is a superstar. Like if there is a superstar, that's her. She's up there.
Oh, 100%. I mean, we talk about in our last podcast how Stevie Nicks is one of the few women, I think the first woman to ever be inducted in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame twice. Carole King can say the same as somebody who was inducted in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and the Songwriting Hall of Fame with her writing partner, her ex-husband, and then in 2021 being recognized as an artist herself. Yeah. So that's like super cool that she has
both of those.
Both of those, yeah. It's nuts. So Far Away is my favorite song. One of my favorite songs of all time, actually. Just have to put that out there.
But yeah, so she records another album. 1977, she collaborates with Rick Evers on Simple Things, which was released by Capitol Records. And then they actually got married. I think that was her last marriage.
Yes.
He died a year later of cocaine overdose.
I know.
And I think after that, she was just like, I'm done.
And that, unfortunately, Simple Things was her first album that failed to reach the top 10 since Tapestry.
It was named the worst album of 1977.
Oh, no.
By Rolling Stones.
Rolling Stones doesn't know what they're talking about. Oh, my gosh. Like I said a little bit ago, I could go on and on about that.
But yeah, they named it the worst album of 1977. And I was like, ooh. I don't know that that's true. But
and then, I mean, as someone who writes so much, she still was releasing albums once a year or like once every other year. She moved from her original label to Atlantic Records in 1982. And then by the late 1980s, she stars in an off-Broadway production of A Minor Incident. She went from being just a songwriter and reaching kind of the peak of success and doing that to becoming a solo artist and reaching the peak of success and doing that and going, all right, what's next for me to tackle? And moves on to writing for film, writing for television, writing for musicals.
In 1988, she wrote Care-a-Lot for the Care Bears movie and Home Is Your Heart. And then scored, in 1985, scored Murphy's Romance. So, like, she starts scoring movies. She starts starring on Broadway's. 1992, she wrote Now and Forever for the opening credits of A League of Their Own and was nominated for a Grammy for it.
Yep. And her little stint off Broadway was not the only time that you see her on that stage. In 1994, she played Mrs. Johnstone on Broadway in Blood Brothers. And in 96, she appeared in Brighton Beach Memoirs in Ireland. And the same year, she released a live album, the Carnegie Hall album from, June of 1971. And it's unbelievable. She recorded background vocals for Celine Dion. She moved on and did like a benefit for divas.
She was, they performed a duet on the first VH1 Divas Live, her and Celine Dion together. And then she also performed You've Got a Friend with Celine, Shania Twain,
Gloria Estefan.
And then she did Natural Woman with Aretha Franklin and Mariah Carey.
If any of you have seen the video footage of that performance, it is so unbelievably funny. It's funny. Like, what's funny is in 1997, Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham are recording Silver Springs, and that live performance will live in infamy. And the Divas performance of You Make Me Feel Like a Natural Woman will live in infamy for a different reason. If you want to watch a diva off where it was not scripted, but then everyone decides to try to one-up each other and just sing the highest notes they possibly can all at once.
Carole King.
Except for Carole, who's just kind of standing there like, okay. Aretha went, this is my song and I'm going to show you bitches up. And I thought it was so funny because Aretha starts going off and then Celine's like, well, then I'm going to start going off. And
then Mariah's like
fucking whistle tones up in the heavens. It is such a fucking like, what's the word? I don't know. I mean, iconic. That's the word for that performance.
It's iconic.
It's iconic. If anything that you take from this, podcast today, or stop listening to this right now and go watch that, and then come back and you.
Oh, so good.
Love it. I love it.
And then so that happens. Definitely go watch that. 1998, she wrote Anyone at All for You've Got Mail, which this is when she starts impacting my life. I'm 8 years old at this time. I love You've Got Mail.
I have a confession. I don't think I've ever seen it.
You've never seen You've Got Mail?
Which is crazy because I do like Meg Ryan. I mean, When Harry Met Sally is one of my favorite movies of all time. But I was like, I like that one. And then never went to go look for another one.
You've Got Mail is so good. You have to look at that one. You have to watch that one. And then in 2000... she was asked to re-record Where You Lead for the Gilmore Girls. And she had kind of stopped performing this song because of the rise in the women's movement. And she didn't like the idea of telling a man, where you lead, I will follow.
Which fair.
And so she rewrote the song and changed lyrics to be more of a sisterly mother-daughter female bond.
Yeah.
And honestly, if I'm, we're about to get into our favorite songs. it is my favorite song, but it's even more my favorite song because of that now. Like I was having trouble picking a favorite song because I love so many of her songs. But when I read that, I was just like, there's the nostalgia of it was the opening for Gilmore Girls. Love Gilmore Girls. But then the fact that she changed the words to fit more of that vibe, and then it was performable again. It didn't feel like and I know as someone who grew up Christian and in a religious background, there was that you follow the man and he's the head of the household, blah blah blah, blah.
Got a little bit of vomit in my mouth.
And so like I get it, you write that I've been in relationships before where I'm like, I'm gonna be submissive, and then I went, this is bullshit. I'm not doing this. And I cut that out. And then I found myself a really good man who doesn't expect me to do that.
Exactly. Hey, and I just want to make a statement. If you would like, whatever you would like your dynamic in your relationships with your partner to be, that is perfectly valid and fine. Yes. I will say from experience, I'm not a submissive person, and that's okay. Because I also grew up religious and was told I needed to be, and I went, you know what? No. Actually, no, thank you. But I do think that is really cool that she took her power back with that song. And you know what? Here's a perfect example of being in one place in your life at a certain time and being another. Because we are not, whatever you see is not whatever you get. And the person I was at 21 is not the person I am here at 28. And I won't be the person I am in my late 50s or 60s like she is in this instance. And being able to change a couple of the lyrics and kind of take back the song to fit the lifestyle that you have now, I think is great. And what's awesome is that when she does perform this song, sometimes she performs it with her daughter, which makes it even more of such a special experience. And I just think that that's so cool. And I think what's crazy is that through all of this, after all of the success between the 1960s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, and her recording the opening track for Gilmore Girls, which is still so synonymous with that specific song. And you'll go on TikTok and you'll see videos of people making aesthetic videos of the fall or autumn season, and people will use that song in the background. She started to take some time off of performing, and you know what? Honestly, girl, take that time. You've been working for 50 years, essentially 40 years. In 2010, she reunites with her best friend James Taylor, and they do a Troubadour reunion tour together. And they started the Troubadour just like the first time they played together in Hollywood in 1970. And then every once in a while, they'll reunite and they'll play a show together. I think this was 5 or 6 years ago. I ended up hearing about it like a month after it happened, that they did a show together, and I'll kick myself for the rest of my life. But our mutual friend Lewis got to see her perform Tapestry in its entirety at Hyde Park in 2016, which was the first time that she ever played all of it live at once. When I first met him and he found out that I love Carole King, he was like, I saw this, and I was like, don't rub it in my face. Don't rub it in. I wasn't in London at the time. My bad. But I just think it's amazing what she's been able to accomplish in her life. Such a full and prosperous life, for sure. And I know that every person is a complicated individual, and I'm sure there are things that she regrets and whatnot, but to have lived like 1,000 lifetimes in one is something that you rarely see by most people, let alone a young woman, that by the time she's 30, she's accomplished what some songwriters will try to accomplish for the rest, or I mean, within their entire life, and then to still have a prosperous career much long after that. 82 years young, by the way, currently, at the time of this podcast, 82 years old, and has just lived a million lives. Yeah.
She just keeps adapting and changing. And even in 2017, she's marching in the Women's March.
Yeah.
And she's still using her legacy and her voice. You were talking about she doesn't perform live very often. She took a break. And there's like even stories of back when she first started, she moved to California. She had a band. They made an album. And it didn't do very well because she didn't want to perform live.
Yeah.
Like,
honestly, I get it.
I feel it.
Stage fright is a bitch.
But she fought through that too. And just not wanting to perform live. And she didn't even, I don't know that she performed live often.
No, it wasn't something that she did very often. And that's why it's so special that 100,000 people came to watch her play in Central Park, because they were like, we have to see her. And I mean, to touch back on what you talked about with like her legacy, she's used her platform to draw issue to things that people weren't talking about. Like, she moved to Idaho to be on a ranch in 1977 and soon became involved in environmental activism, which is still something that a lot of people are not on that train for just yet. Women's rights have always been a big deal to her as well. And I think that she uses her platform regardless of the kudos that it gives her, and that's something that I see a lot of, this concept of performative activism post the 2020 pandemic. And she hasn't been just talking about it for 50 years. She's been about it for 50 plus years and has been instrumental in the fight for equality for women and femme presenting individuals, and also for the environment, because what's really important is what we leave behind for our future generations. So Carole King is a hero.
Yes. 5 awards, inducted 3 times into the Grammy Hall of Fame, honored at the Grammy Trustees Award, Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award, and MusiCare's Person of the Year.
And she could give a fuck if she was or not, by the way. And I love that. It's important to talk about just how much of a legacy that she has impressed upon songwriters of every gender and background since the 1950s, and the gateways that she's opened for people that might not have had the opportunity before. I think that it's so awesome that she's used the platform that she's been given, not only to like give voice to people that might not have the opportunity to do so through her activism, but also to give opportunity to people that might not otherwise have it. Like, you know, prior to Little Eva becoming Little Eva, she was their babysitter. And they were like, we'll help you start your career with a #1 hit single, or like the Shirelles, you know, writing a song that not only lasts the test of time for them, but gives a way to the first Black female group to have a #1 hit single. I think that that's really admirable and really cool. And it's not something that you see super often in today's world.
Or even back then. The fact that like then in a world like that. So I think we're going to have to split this up into periods. Because we're going to start with album. Out of her 22 albums, I just counted them.
Oh my gosh.
Out of her 22 albums, what do you think is your favorite?
I mean,
obviously, I feel like Tapestry is.
Yes. I mean, it's the first album that I heard of hers. I just pulled it out of a CD binder because I thought that the front picture was cool and there was a cat on it. I was like, this looks like this would be nice to listen to. And I was correct. It's more than nice to listen to. I have a rule in my car. If I am driving, I can't listen to it. Because, by the way, me losing track of where I was going and driving almost all the way to the border of our country, there have been a couple other times that I've listened to that album and completely lost my exit and ended up in a different city than I was supposed to be in. It is so dumb. That's happened multiple times, but it's mesmerizing. So
yes,
as I don't care, you know, it's one of the best albums of all time for a reason.
It's great. It's great road trip music because Leo and I did listen to it on our way to Vegas for my brother's wedding, and I was like, this is perfection.
It's just the definition of easy listening, and I think that it touches on so many aspects of the human condition. I think it's so beautiful. It's so honest. I mean, I know that they wrote Will You Still Love Me like 10 years earlier, but oh my gosh, to hear her version of what Will You Still Love Me Tomorrow, there's just this warmth, there's this familiarity, there's this vintage quality about it where you're listening to your grandma sing, and there's something really magical about that, especially for people that have strained relationships with their family members. Kind of fills that void a little bit.
Other than Tapestry, is there one that sticks out to you more than others?
That is a good question. I feel like I'd say Rhythm and Reasons, which I know came out like the next year. It's another album I've listened to quite a bit of, but still I always go back to Tapestry, I think.
Yeah.
That's for me. I don't know about
No, Tapestry is like my number one, but I also really enjoyed Music, which was the same one released that year.
Mm-hmm.
And I have like a few songs written down here, like I loved Brother Brother, Music. The song music, I put 3 hearts next to it. I just loved the like jam band feel of that, and Brighter, and I loved Brighter. So I would say, and it was released the same year as Tapestry, so I'm sure that as she's writing Tapestry, she's writing the music for this. I loved that album too. So I would say that one is probably my favorite other than Tapestry, but I almost feel like they're kind of one.
Yeah.
like it's part 2 to Tapestry.
It really is. It really is. It's the B-sides. It's like, to keep bringing it to Taylor Swift, but I don't know somebody else that's writes as much as she does, but it's the Evermore to her Folklore, which both came out the same year. So,
I really enjoyed Writer too. I loved No Easy Way Down. That one was so good. And Up on the Roof with James Taylor is just...
Oh, yeah.
It's a classic.
Oh, yeah.
But okay, so this is where I'm going to split it. I want to hear your favorite song that she wrote when she was in the Brill Building.
Mm-hmm.
And then your favorite song that she wrote after she started recording for herself.
Well, so my favorite song that she wrote when she was a part of that Brill Building sound period, I mentioned it a couple times tonight, but like, Will You Still Love Me Tomorrow? I think that even if we took out the lyrics, the opening piano part has this, like, you instantly kind of are transported to a specific emotion. Like, she has such a quality of being able to bring you into the world of the song before the lyrics are even heard. I could sit there and think, oh, what is this going to be about? And I already know. I think that she has such a magical quality about her with that when it comes to that. So Will You Still Love Me Tomorrow is my favorite from that particular era. Regardless, Cheryl's version, her version, Amy Winehouse did a cover of it. Oh, that's so good. So I don't know about you for that time period.
It's hard. I would say Natural Woman just because I grew up on that song. I love that song. It's such a good song. And I love the different takes. Like, I love Aretha.
Mm-hmm.
You can't go wrong with Aretha.
Mm-hmm.
But I love her take on it, too. Like, it's just more soft. It's more simple. It's more just feeling it. Like, not trying to show anything off. It's
just honest.
Natural.
It's just natural.
So we have our favorite albums. We have our favorite Brill Building songs. So what is your favorite song that she wrote, like, after the 1970s? Laurel Canyon.
My favorite Carole King song of all time is So Far Away. That is the song that got me hooked on the album in the first place. Like, the very first time I popped it into my CD player in my Honda Civic. So Far Away comes on and I'm like, hold the fucking phone. What is going on? And my very first semester of Test Flight, which in our hometown, we have a community college program that does commercial music. And there's a class where you get to learn how to be in a band, but specifically more of like doing like cover band work. In my very first semester, we did a theme of being on the road or traveling. And I suggested So Far Away from Carole King, and I got to sing it, and it's just always been a song that I felt so connected to, even though I'm not personally on the road constantly. It's just this longing for connection and community that I think that, it's so great that she was able to capture. And I think it's just such a beautifully written song. I mean, I could say wonderful things about every single song on Tapestry, but So Far Away is just my jam.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that my favorite is probably Where You Lead, but the Gilmore Girls version.
Yeah.
I absolutely adore that song. I think I mentioned it earlier, just the nostalgia and then the fact that it changed and then the fact that, I mean, I was having trouble picking a favorite one, and then when I read the history of it being rewritten and everything, I was like, okay, you win. But, I mean, I love So Far Away. I love... You've Got a Friend. I love Will You Love Me Tomorrow. I mean, those were written earlier, but they're on her Tapestry album.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say mine is probably Where You Lead. Maybe it's purely for the nostalgia feels that
It's been a part of your life for your whole life.
Yeah.
That's what makes it so special.
And it's one of those songs that when you hear thank you for being a friend, it just makes you happy.
Yeah.
Like,
you hear that like opening bass. Boo, boo, boo.
yeah.
It's just so like ready to grab your cup of coffee and sit down and watch a show.
Yeah.
It's just, she makes music for the everyday person. I mean, I've read countless interviews and I've watched countless interviews of people talking about Carole King, and the attraction to her is that she feels like she makes music for you, for your sister, for your mom, for your grandma, whoever, and it's not this like unattainable thing like, oh, this person is out of this world. It's like this person
is sitting in the living room right next to me.
Yeah. And she has that vibe now. Like, you see her around and you're like, oh, yeah, that's just Carole, man.
That's Auntie Carole.
Yeah, exactly. I love her.
So, last question. What does Carole mean to you in your life and your songwriting? Like, what's your big takeaway from her?
I think, so when I did discover Tapestry in the CD binder, my family dynamic was significantly changing. I was graduating high school. My parents were divorcing. And I didn't really feel like I had much of an identity. My identity prior to graduating high school was in the church and then in like high school choir. And I was whatever my parents wanted me to be. And here I am looking at or stumbling on the precipice of my actual life as an adult. I'm freshly 18. I'm about to move out for the first time. And I don't know who I am and I don't know who I'm going to be. And I find Tapestry and I start wanting to chase whatever that feeling is. Whatever the feeling of Tapestry is, that's the person I want to be. That's the life I want to have. And I mean, I don't think that I've come very close to that, but I will definitely say it's her music as a whole is important to me as not just a person, but as a songwriter, because I'm just trying to chase that honesty and that catharsis that her music gives me. Like, I want to be able to do that for other people. So I think that would be my answer to that question. Very long-winded, sorry.
No, it's great. I feel like my takeaway is just that she is a normal person. She is, and not in a bad way, but she didn't think that she could accomplish this because nobody would want to listen to her. And look what she's done.
Yeah.
And so I need to not be afraid of being a normal person and still doing this stuff. I don't have to be some rich superstar person in fancy clothes and like, you can be Auntie Carole from the farm
and write some of the best music of all time.
Yes.
So 100%. I think one last thing to take away from all that she's accomplished is, even though she found immense success as like a 17-year-old, and I know the music scene is rife with ageism currently, and it's like, well, if you're starting to be looked at as getting older at like 24, it's rough out there to be a woman, and it's rough out there to be a musician who wants to find some sort of success in their life. But she released one of the best albums of all time when she had 2 kids already, and she was almost 30 years old. And you don't have to look a certain way or act a certain way to be successful.
Yes.
Same thing with Stevie Nicks. She joined Fleetwood Mac when she was 27. So it's not over. Time's not up just yet. It's only over when you give up.
Amen.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you guys for joining us. This month, I picked who we are doing next. And we are going to do Beyonce next month, which is... She just dropped 2 new singles. Her new album comes out next month.
Yeehaw, motherfuckers, it's time. Get your freaking cowboy boots on.
Let's go. So join us next month. We'll be talking about Beyonce, her new music, her history, Destiny's Child, which was my first concert ever.
Just how she's, a literal god on planet Earth, and we are not worthy to be alive at the same time that she is.
There we go.
Amen.
We will see you next month.